Now it is. It's an interview with Tomi Dufva from Finland. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. So we read your papers about craftsmen and in Finland, and they were very interesting and provided a lot of insight into why Finland is introducing computer science through craft. And I want us to elaborate a little more on that. So how long has this approach of the maker movement has been introduced in Finland?
Well, I don't know how long sort of officially the sort of teaching programming in the basic education in the curriculum started in 2016, and from there on it's been sort of integrated in two subjects. So one is mathematics and one is craft. So they are sort of in one way together responsible for teaching programming, but that's not really clear. So all the sort of schools can little bit also improvise. So there might be other teachers from other subjects as well, but they have this kind of a main sort of a responsibility of it in one way, I think.
And what do you mean that teachers can improvise?
Well, from the sort of a larger context, it's that in our curriculum it is very sort of a broad, that it gives you just sort of main themes and suggestions, and then all the teachers can in some way also interpret the sort of curriculum in their own way. And there's this kind of I don't know how would you say it in English, but sort of this kind of larger themes that are meant to compass all of the teaching. Sort of this kind of one of them is, for example, has been digitalization. And then it's up to the teachers and the schools or districts to decide that how would they like to do it. So we have had some schools that implement sort of a learning programming with many different teachers. So there might be something with physics teachers, math teachers, art teachers, craft teachers, and so on. And then they come up with some kind of how can they join their sort of courses and forces together and do it. So there's lots of different kind of implementations, but and it varies a lot, because there's from first till sixth grade you have one teacher and then maybe some specialty teachers, but from there on there's much more sort of a wider range of teachers. So that from 7 to 9, which is the end of the basic education in Finland, when they are 15, the last 3 years are more maybe free. So in the sort of lower education, then the teacher is more sort of has more maybe sort of some kind of a way of adding the programming in, I don't know, mathematics usually and craft, but then in the sort of second grade or from the 7th till 9th grade, there's more sort of a freedom, and there one can see more this kind of creative implementations of the curriculum maybe.
Okay, and do you know what are some of the ways, or can you give us some examples of the ways that teachers have implemented? I mean, you mentioned that the implementation is heterogeneous, that it varies.
Yeah.
Can you recognize like some of the main approaches or the main guidelines that the different teachers are following?
Yeah, I think the main guidelines is that in teaching programming from the first grade, I think almost up to 6th grade, it's more to do with the sort of algorithmic thinking and using mostly this kind of a visual programming language. It's like Scratch or this kind of so just to give this kind of idea of basic programming, and then from there on there's possibilities to go further with different kind of programming languages. I think the most common is to use Python, and then it's mostly derived from the sort of a math teacher's approach, because there's this kind of lots of modules for Python to add math and programming, but then there's also this kind of other paths to take, and one of them is in crafts to introduce robotics or microcontrollers, and then learn programming by doing sort of interactive work or robotics or something. That's maybe the sort of a second quite often used way. And then there's this kind of teachers or schools that sort of use this very sort of widely or creatively. For example, there was one school that had this kind of and this was actually for lower grade. I think it was sixth or fifth. Yeah, they collaborated with fourth graders and sixth graders. So they had Lego Mindstorm robots, which has this visual language, and the sixth graders created the robots, and then the fourth graders created this kind of terrain for the robot to go. And the idea was to sort of introduce that how does these rovers in Mars go, and how would you sort of develop sort of a robot that can go in different kind of terrain. And then the ones who created the robot had no idea that what's coming there, so they could not prepare, but they had to think about ways that how to get away with these kind of different obstacles and things like that. And it was a sort of a large collaboration of physics and geography and history, and then also of course craft and mathematics. So that's maybe one sort of a different kind of way to do the same thing.
Okay. And how did Finland authorities decided on the maker movement to introduce computer science? Was there a lot of debate? Was that an easy decision because of the tradition of Finland with the craft? How do you see that?
Well, I don't know if there's a sort of a decision of maker movement, that it's mostly sort of that it's influenced some decision making, but I don't think there's any mention in the official documents about maker movement. It's more likely that there has been sort of lots of inspiration because of the maker movement. And there's of course the sort of Finland has the old tradition of having crafts, and we have crafts in education, in basic education, for over 100 years. So there's a sort of it has a sort of a strong tradition, and that might be of course one reason. I think the second is of course that maker movement is quite sort of a popularized the whole idea, and then it has had this kind of drivers like 3D printing for schools and these kind of things that were also sort of very much advertised for schools. So there's this kind of different kind of forces that it was in one part driven by the sort of education technology markets, and in other way from the maker movement that might be something really interesting to do as well. And then we had some kind of grants from the government that schools could apply, and they were sort of a digitalization sort of grants. And if you had the idea of doing your own some kind of let's say sort of a maker place or sort of a maker lab, then you could get some funding for it. And I think that's also drove a lot of the interest in the sort of a maker movement.
And did many schools apply for that funding?
I think many did, and there was quite many sort of schools that got, for example, the 3D printer. And of course, then the problem is that there hasn't really been sort of education for it, how to actually use it in pedagogical way, and that's been lacking in the education a lot. That how do you really implement, let's say, 3D printing or the same with programming? That how do you implement it in sort of a pedagogical manner? And this is of course sort of an ongoing process.
And
in Finland as well.
How was the new curriculum was received for the craft teachers? Were they enthusiastic, or they were some resistance to the new the new craft curriculum? I am imagining that I'm a craft teacher. I've been teaching all these methods and crafts for the last 10 years, and all of a sudden, it's asked of me to teach computer science concepts. How is this received by the teachers?
I think I have not read, but there has been some studies of it also. But sort of my understanding is that it was really divided. That there are this kind of a traditional way and traditional teachers that want to keep craft as a craft, and they don't really understand that what does programming has to do with craft. And then there's the other ones who really got inspired and sort of saw lots of possibilities. So it was a sort of a yes and no, quite clearly, that there was not so much sort of a middle ground, but it sort of divided the camps a lot.
And I wonder about the status of the discipline. You know, in schools, there are some disciplines that are symbolically more important than others. Like, for example, math has traditionally a better status than physical education, at least in my country. Where would you put craft education in the Finland educational system in terms of disciplinary status in the curriculum?
Well, it's sort of a suffering, like all the sort of craft and art and physical subjects are suffering. That sort of a math is the most important, and it's been emphasized a lot, and because of the PISA records and all of these kind of things, it really emphasizes or highlights maths and yeah, mostly maybe maths.
So you would craft has traditionally a lower status than math.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I was wondering what does it mean to introduce computer science in a subject that it's already not symbolically not viewed as that important.
Yeah, but I think it just mainly because it was not sort of really done through crafts, but it was done through that. Now we have programming in schools, and sort of a responsibility was not clear, and then I think the math took the sort of most of the responsibility, and the craft has always been there in the sort of background in one way.
Okay. So you think that the concepts are through math, and craft is supporting the implementation? Is that
in somewhat? I think this is maybe the sort of
okay.
Yeah.
So you wrote a paper about the experience of robotics, right? Is that an out of a school program?
Yeah.
And how long has it been in place?
Robotti is a sort of a non-profit organization, and I think it was founded in 2015. And last year it got government funding. So as a part of this kind of after-school art school project that it got some funding, and we have and they have some kind of a curriculum for it now, which is sort of in this kind of a media art curriculum. So it's sort of joins together craft and art schools in one way, that the media, at least for Robotti. But before it had sort of run through volunteer work and sort of external funding from foundations and so on.
So I was wondering if this program was because of, as a result of the curriculum, but you mentioned that it's before the curriculum that robotics was implemented. And what kind of students attend this program?
Well, Robotti has different kind of a sort of a programs. That there's this kind of a weekly courses that you can apply, and it costs money. It has a sort of a fee, for a yearly fee, and the yearly fee depends on the sort of amount of grants or money we got from foundations, and it covers the teacher's salary mostly, and materials, of course. So there's these kind of things, and there's different kind of courses. There has been sort of one for preschool students, and then one from sort of 8 till 11-year-old, and then one for teenagers. And the most popular has been the sort of 8 to 11-year students, so 8 to 12-year students. And then we also have had lots of different kinds of workshops and projects, and we have been working in schools and with children with special care, and lots of different kind of groups. And then we have also got this funding for working with girls, and highlighting this kind of programming and robotics for girls as well, because it's quite male dominated here at least.
Yeah, it's the same here. So one question that we couldn't answer with the papers that we read is about what happens in high school. I mean, you have the vocational school, and then you have the preparatory system. So what happened with computer science there? We didn't see any mandatory computer science after you finish the unified school system. Is that correct?
Yeah, it varies. So there's this, maybe you could call it high schools for students from 15 to 18 that they take, and there's usually two different lines. One is a sort of preparing for a job, a kind of a school, and then another one is more sort of general, that you have to take if you want to apply for university and so on. And those don't have any programming sort of in curriculum per se, but I think some schools do still have it. That's integrated in different kind of subjects, and we are just introducing the new sort of a curriculum for it. I think it's going to be active this year in the fall, and the sort of digitalization is this kind of one of the themes, and sort of a programming is also inside it, but there's no sort of in the same way as in the basic curriculum, there's no sort of a clear way that who does teach programming and so on. But the situation is quite same, that there's math teachers that take responsibility for it in one way, and then there's also language teachers or the mother language teachers who take the sort of answer of this kind of multiliteracy kind of a way. That how does this affect in a sort of a societal manner, and then there's some kind of attempt, at least, that art teachers, music and visual arts could also take it in this kind of creative coding way, and there are some schools that do it and some that don't, so it's a little bit sort of vague.
Okay. And so, one more last question. So, how would you describe the implementation of this new curriculum? What are the upsides and the downsides? How would you do differently to make sure that most teachers offer this content knowledge in Finland schools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it has not been implemented for that long that we could really know that what would be the sort of a best practices from the teachers. I think my opinions are that there should be sort of it should be integrated in more larger sense that now the sort of a drivers in programming is that it's a sort of a 21st century skill, so it's an important skill for future job possibilities and so on, and then the sort of computational thinking kind of a way that we should know how computers think, and this could be sort of broadened a lot more to sort of cover this kind of a societal and creative manners as well, and this has not been really done in the curriculum at all. So it's mostly sort of focused on the sort of very basics of teaching programming, and there should be much more sort of educational possibilities for teachers to sort of expand their knowledge. That now the sort of most of the sort of their teaching programming teaching knowledge might come from the 1 day or 1 week course that some company comes to teach them, and it mostly kind of only focus on the sort of devices they use, and then the sort of wider perspective is lost quite well. And there's lots of different kind of devices that I have heard from teachers that are lying in the basement of the schools, because after the company representative has gone, no one knows how to really implement these. So sort of a pedagogical practices might be the sort of the most important thing, that how do you really take them into use, and how to sort of deal with all the sort of anxiety and problems that arise when you are using programming. For example, that they never work as the way they were intended, that there are always some bugs in so many ways that teachers might find really difficult to use or implement in their teaching. So I think that that's the sort of a one. And the other is that how does these tools sort of how can they be implemented in their sort of everyday teaching routines, that if it requires to boot up some computers that never get boot up, and then there's some updates and things like this, that these things only need to happen 1 or 2 times, and then the teachers get tired and they won't do it anymore, and they find some easier way to do the same thing, and that might not be as fruitful. So there's lots of this kind of difficulties, I think.
And what has been the role of INOCA? I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. Is the network of the teachers organized by the University of Helsinki?
What was the name again?
INOCA. INOCA?
INOCAS, yes.
Okay, INOCA. Sorry.
Yeah. It's a sort of a wide network. It's mostly working in the sort of capital region, and they have had lots of. They are responsible for a lot of sort of a teacher training, and that way there has lots of sort of inspiring works. I think they should have had their sort of end conference now in May, but it was postponed to August. So where sort of results should have been sort of delivered, but I think it continues still in some way, and there's lots of interesting things in there, and I think there is still the sort of one problematic is that it's been really focused on the sort of idea of computational thinking and well, my perspective is that it should be wider perspective, that you should have this kind of a wider perspective of sort of in education and in crafts as well, that what does it mean for my sort of environment and so on. But it's very encouraging project, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for your time. I don't know if you want to add anything else. It was very interesting and insightful.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm not really, I think there might be also some teachers that work more in the Innokas network. I don't know if you have contacted them. They might also share some interesting sort of.
I did, but nobody replied. I don't know if
Okay.
you have.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah.
I know. If you have any contacts, I will appreciate it because I have to make one more interview. So if you know somebody from Inocast that you could introduce me, that would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, I can do that. And then there's also another similar project that's called InnoPlay. It's done by Turku University from the sort of craft education professors there, and I can introduce you to them as well if you want. I can send an email or something.
Please, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Great. So I think they have also lots of insights into these things.
Yes. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.
And I don't know if you